He has shed blood for his lord, he has been exiled twice, he has fought in civil wars, he has fought against Christians and against Muslims. They call him El Cid Campeador, a legendary warrior who is going to face an impossible challenge. To fight against an army 3 times larger and conquer the city of Valencia while facing the powerful Almoravid Empire. Prepare to learn about the Battle of Quart and the taking of Valencia. In the year 1092, King Alfonso of Leon tried to finish his father's plan to curb the expansionism of the other Christian kingdoms on the peninsula, taking over Valencia. To do this, he tried to convene a crusade in Europe under the pretext of stopping the advance of the Almoravid. However, of all those who promised him help, no one showed up. The fleets of Genoa and Pisa didn't even set sail, and the armies of Aragon and Barcelona turned back before they could meet Alfonso. Big problem. What was happening? That Valencia was a tributary of El Cid Campeador, and he did not take well to Alfonso's intentions, so he launched a punitive campaign against La Rioja, with no one able to stop him. The campaign was going well until late summer, when he received a missive from Al-Qadir, king of the Taifa of Valencia. It turns out that there had been a coup in the city, and the faction in favor of the Almoravids had taken power. The new Qadir established what he called a government of true Muslims and immediately alerted the Saracen army in Murcia to begin its advance north. El Cid immediately cancelled his campaign and headed to Valencia, arriving in the fall. But of course, an assault on the city would be madness, at least with the Almoravid army so close. But then luck smiled on Rodrigo. The Almoravids decided that Lisbon was more important than Valencia, so they sent a small garrison to the city and sent the rest to the west, leaving the way clear for El Cid. To take the city, he began taking over the surroundings of Valencia, and in the year 1093 he sent a message to Valencia. If they surrendered and swore vassalage to him again, nothing would happen to them. Although they initially accepted, they quickly sent a message for help to the Almoravids to finish off the Cid. After discovering this, he besieged the city in September of that year once more. But it wouldn't be until July of the year 1094 that Valencia would surrender due to hunger. Valencia had just been reconquered by Christianity after nearly 500 years under Muslim rule. The champion took the title of Prince Rodrigo because, as Alfonso had signed years ago, everything that El Cid conquered would be the property of El Cid. But the peace and joy didn't last long. 2 months later, the Almoravids sent a huge army to retake the city. They sent it by sea to avoid an ambush by the Campeador. An army of 30,000 Saracens. On September 13th, they disembarked and settled near the current Guardia Poble. And what could the Criminal Investigation Department do? Well, he had 2,500 knights and 7,000 infantrymen. They outnumbered him by more than 3 to 1. He had to use all his wit to be able to win the battle, because remember that the Almoravids had not yet been defeated in the Iberian Peninsula. The first thing he did was to proclaim to the 4 winds that they had asked for help from Kings Pedro V of Aragon and Alfonso VI of Leon, and that they were already on their way to expel the Almoravids. During the early morning of October 21st of the year 1094, the infantry of the Cid, with him at the head, left through the south gate of the city in the dark. With all the metal covered in garments and fabrics, so that not the slightest noise would be made, they first advanced southward, without speaking, without torches, guided by the knowledge they already had of the terrain. After about 30 minutes of marching, they turned west and then continued marching even more cautiously as they approached the Muslim camp. After overcoming the Saracen royal camps, they let themselves fall to the ground to rest, as the next day would be hard. They ate cold food for breakfast and stayed huddled among the grass to avoid being discovered. With the first rays of the sun, Rodrigo's knights left through the west gate of the city with their banners held high and making a loud noise. The Almoravids thought that the Christians wanted to fight, so they arranged their entire army in battle order. Once formed, they began advancing towards the Christian cavalry. They were far from the walls of Valencia, which encouraged the Saracens because if they won, they would have enough time to crush the knights. For their part, Rodrigo's cavalry had orders to keep the Muslims as far away from their camp as possible. The Almoravid cavalry charged against the Christian ones, which in turn launched a countercharge. The Cid's cavalry was heavier, but the Saracen ones seemed victorious and was also superior in number, so they charged fearlessly. There was a thunderous clash between both cavalries, and after just a few minutes of fighting, the Christians ordered the retreat. Of course, seeing suddenly 2,500 heavy knights turn around and flee from the enemy army. The Almoravid morale shot through the roof, and they all launched in pursuit of the Christians. And then Rodrigo ordered the attack. The infantry of the champion rose and ran towards the Saracen camp. That's right, without a flag, so as not to be recognized by the Muslim troops that were there. The Almoravids, seeing an army charging at them from the west and seeing no flags, thought they were reinforcements from Leon, and their morale plummeted. The Castilian troops stormed the camp and crushed all resistance they found, taking over the supplies and stored treasures. The Almoravid reserve might still have been near the camp. Would they try to expel the Christians from there? But Rodrigo probably threw himself at them and destroyed them without difficulty, ending any hope they might have had of balancing the situation. They immediately set off in pursuit of the main Almoravid army, and as soon as the news spread, panic set in. Then the knights stopped fleeing, turned around and charged against the Almoravid army. It was a massacre. Trapped between two fronts, the Almoravids tried to escape to the north and to the south, trying to get away from the Christian swords, but they were pursued and executed on the spot. Valencia was finally of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. During the next 3 years, the Criminal Investigation Department was able to reign his domains, gradually expanding his territories. Until in the year 1096, a new Almoravid army threatened to take the city again. They came from the south, and it was an army that once again far surpassed the forces of the Cid. Despite having already managed to defeat them once in clear numerical inferiority, would he risk another encounter under those conditions? What he did was ask for help from Pedro V, and together, in the year 1097, they headed south, facing the Almoravids in the Battle of Bayren, where the Christians emerged victorious, causing a large number of casualties among the Saracens. At last, it seemed that the Muslims were about to surrender Valencia. So the Criminal Investigation Department dedicated himself to preparing a future lordship with its own independence around his son Diego. However, he would die in the Battle of Consuegra, which we will probably learn about in another video. The important thing here for Rodrigo is that he had lost his only son, so his lineage would disappear with his own death. And it didn't take long to arrive. In the year 1099, Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, known as El Cid Campeador, died without an heir. His wife, Jimena, took over ruling his domains, but the task proved to be quite impossible. The Almoravids, upon learning of El Cid's death, began to press again, either by slowly advancing from the south or through propaganda. Since in Valencia itself there were Islamic fundamentalists from the same faction that supported the coup against Al-Qadir. Social unrest began to increase, which made governance even more difficult. Finally, in August of the year 1101, the Almoravids arrived near Valencia and besieged the city, depriving it of resources, mainly food. This was a countdown. Without a strong leader, the Christians would lose the siege and would be put to the sword. But Jimena had an ace up her sleeve. This is a legend much later than the events. Yes, it does look good, but just think about what would be left of El Cid's corpse 2 years after his death. What he actually did was ask for help from Alfonso VI. He, leading his men, came without hesitation to the city, and without even going into battle, the Saracens lifted the siege and abandoned the city. Okay, now let's zoom out the map and observe the borders of the Kingdom of Leon. But not only these that border the Almoravids, also those that border the other kingdoms. And add to these those of the Taifas of Valencia, which has clearly shown that it cannot defend itself on its own. If it has to cover the entire border, either the defenses will be very weak or it will be left without a reserve army that can go to any point where it is necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, there was only one possible solution. In May of the year 1102, the Christians left the city of Valencia, taking with them the corpse of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, the Cid Campeador. And just 2 days later, on May 5th, the Almoravids entered the city and re-annexed it to the African Empire. Notice that from here, they now have a base from which to launch attacks against the county of Barcelona and against the Taifa of Zaragoza, the only independent Muslim kingdom that resisted against the Almoravid pressure. 2 years later, in September of the year 1104, Pedro I of Aragon and Navarra would die without offspring. Do you know who would inherit the crown? Alfonso V, the Battler.